welcome to another episode of the Boxing Lockdown, powered by SA Boxing Talk. The two gentlemen, Hayden and Cyril, are in the house with me. We have another special guest, again, not from South Africa, from overseas. Ring Magazine dubbed her the First Lady of Boxing. 1991 was a prolific upset. James Toney knocked out Michael Nunn in the 11th round. And the person guiding James at the time was Jackie Kallen. There was a movie in 2004, Meg Ryan Against the Ropes, that came out because of her, giving her a kind of image of a life story, not really quite, but still. Jackie, welcome. This is a big moment for me. I was checking the emails, and you and I have been in touch for the last 16 years, but welcome to the Boxing Lockdown, powered right here in South Africa.
Well, thank you so much. I am so excited to finally see you face to face, because it has been a long time that we've been in contact. And I remember sending you a signed picture many years ago, right?
That's still up in my wall in the gym. So yeah,
that's
I'll never
an honor
forget
to
that.
me. I feel very honored. So that's great. Thank you.
So Jackie, I'm going to get right into it, and I want to cast your mind back 29 years ago. You took a chance. You took one big chance. You weren't supposed to win. I believe you came in as a late replacement with a young fighter. Brash, arrogant, strong kid called James Lights Out Toney against Michael Nunn. And at the time, Michael Nunn, you had the phasing out of Hagler, Leonard, Duran, and obviously Tommy. Well, Tommy's still going, and some of the fighters still went on. But Michael Nunn was a fighter that was supposed to take over from those guys. And I'm going to ask you the question that going in was a big risk, but you were losing the fights going into the 11th round. Now, before the stoppage in the 11th round, going into the 11th round, what were you thinking knowing that your fighter was behind?
Well, actually, it was about the 9th round where I started to see him coming back a little bit. The 9th round, the 10th round. It was interesting because by the 7th or 8th, I sort of accepted the fact that we were going to get a loss. It was in his hometown. He didn't knock him out, and he wasn't outboxing him. He wasn't winning the rounds. But in the 9th round, it's almost like he kind of woke up and he just realized how important this was. And he had a lot to prove. And by the 10th round, he was back in the fight. And that 11th round with that left hook, that just changed his whole world. It certainly changed my path. And it made believers out of a lot of people because, like you say, he was 20-1 underdog. And there were 8,000 of his fans there and maybe a handful of ours that had driven in. But it was a monumental night for me because I had proven that I was a good manager, not just a good female manager. And that was important to me.
Well, Jackie, taking it back a little bit, you started working with fighters when you became publicist for Tommy Hitman Hearns.
Right.
Obviously, those were very early days for him. Did you see him becoming the legend that he did become back then?
You mean with Thomas?
With Thomas, yes.
Yeah, well, I went to do an interview with Tommy. I was a sports writer, and he was a 4-round fighter. He had been winning all of his early fights, and I'd never been to a fight. So I was very new to the sport. I didn't really know what I was looking at, except I was fascinated by it. And he looked so ferocious and his stare was so evil. And I was like amazed at that focus. And he knocked the guy out in the first round. And then when I went to interview him, he was the sweetest, most soft-spoken man. Well, kid, he was 20 years old, but he was so shy. And I thought, how is that possible? How did this sweet, quiet, humble little boy go in there and rip this man's head off his head? I was shocked. So I became fascinated with the psychology of the sport, that whole aspect of being able to go in there and intentionally want to hurt somebody and then go hug them afterwards and say, let's go have a beer together. I didn't know how you could turn that on and off. And of course I learned over the years, but that really piqued my interest in Tommy and in the sport. And little by little, I started interviewing Emmanuel Stewart, some of the other fighters, and then they hired me, and that was history for me because I never looked back.
Jackie, what was the transition like between, obviously starting as a journalist and then sort of moving into the management world? Which did you prefer firstly? And I mean, how did that happen?
Well, I first was exposed to boxing as a journalist. I went there to do a story, and I was fascinated with it. And when I got the opportunity from Emmanuel to sign on as their publicist, I thought, wow, this will be interesting. I can write press releases, set up photo shoots, do weigh-ins and press conferences, and learn a lot about the sport. But Emmanuel was so welcoming to me as a woman, as a female, whatever. He taught me how to wrap hands, how to stop cuts, how to assess fighters where they are in their careers, who's good to match them with, who's not. Taught me that styles make fights. So that learning curve was a 10-year period where I was his publicist, as well as continuing to write. I continued to write all the way up until the late 90s. So I had kind of that dual thing going. I was a boxing writer and I was a publicist. And then 10 years later, I wanted to try my hand at managing. And I asked Emmanuel what he thought, and he said, go for it. And I found a heavyweight named Bobby Hitz who had come to Detroit to fight George Foreman, didn't win, but I thought maybe it'd be fun to work with him. And working with him led me to James Toney and many other fighters in the gym. And before I knew it, I was a manager. And that was 32 years ago. So it's been a great, great journey.
And the South African connection to Bobby Hitz is that he fought Pierre Kutzer. I mean, I don't want to talk about the results.
Yeah,
but
he did. Well, the results are, he was the nicest guy, coach. So we loved him. He was a gentleman. He was friendly. If you're going to lose to somebody, it should be someone as nice as him.
I want to cast your mind back, and there's been a lot of talk about, obviously, you and James Toney together, but a lot of talk doesn't happen around Bill Miller, his trainer. And I have been told by several trainers in America on my trips that they reckon that James Toney probably could have been one of the greatest fighters in history, but also he defensively was a master. What was your impression of Bill Miller, and do you think he gets enough credit? Because I'm one of the trainers in the world who feels that he really doesn't.
That's a great question. I'm so glad you brought it up, because Bill Miller had been a trainer at Kronk when I first met him, and that's back in like late 70s. And he had been around for years. He had trained in New York in the old Stillman's gym and the old gyms back in the day, in the Joe Louis and Ezzard Charles and Sugar Ray Robinson days. He was very learned in the sport. He wasn't like today's trainers. He wasn't just a cheerleader in the corner. He didn't just, give you water and tell you what to do. He was a teacher, and he was very technical, and he would sit with his fighters and show them films of all the old fighters and what did they do right and what can you do to incorporate that into your little trick bag. And so when I got James Toney under my tutelage, I realized that the trainer he had was very adequate as an amateur and early pro, but to get him all the way, I felt he needed someone that could teach him a little bit more than just the basics. So I turned to Bill Miller and I asked if he would consider training James, and he watched him spar a couple times and he said, that boy's got it. And I said, thank you. I think you can take him even farther. And he did. And I think the first thing that impressed Bill, besides his attitude, because he was a very surly kind of mean guy, which shows that he was capable of doing whatever it took to get to the top. He had this way of tucking his shoulder, rolling his left shoulder in, and then picking off shots and tucking his chin and keeping his, elbows so tight to his body and curling up where you couldn't get to him. And that's a very hard technique to do. A lot of fighters can't really do it well. And that defense was a great tool, because if you can't hit somebody, you can't knock them out. And James would quickly get in that defensive mode. You couldn't hit him. Then he'd turn around, switch positions, and then get you. So Bill taught him a lot of tricks that he probably wouldn't have learned. He had an innate talent that he was born with, and I think Bill Miller honed it to perfection. He did the same with Bronco McCart, who was an average fighter who had lost the National Golden Gloves, but I saw something in him. He was a scrappy little southpaw. And I asked Bill Miller, can you do something with this kid? And he said, I think I can. And we got him to a world title as well. But again, it was Bill. I think Bill made the difference with both of them.
And then looking at your career, you worked in boxing in the 80s and the early 90s. How difficult was it as a woman to get taken seriously in those days?
Another good question, because today with the Me Too movement and all the emphasis on how women are treated, I suppose if I were to go back to the late 70s, early 80s, I could have some interesting viewpoints of how women are looked at in a industry that's basically male. But again, it's how you handle it. I never suffered from any kind of sexual harassment because I deflected it right away, either with humor, like laughing, or turning it into a joke, pretending I didn't even understand what they, play the dumb blonde, like, I don't know what you're talking about. But again, it's knowing who you are and being able to get in with the boys and play with those big boys, because I wouldn't have made it this far and been a force in a male-dominated sport if I wasn't able to get in with the sharks and swim with them without getting, eaten up. And I just held my own, and I always maintained, I thought, my dignity, and I demanded respect. I gave respect to all the people that I worked with. And at the beginning, some of the comments were like, well, why don't you just put on a bikini and be a ring card girl? That's what women should do. And, I would laugh it off and say, well, maybe, I'll give that some thought. Or I'd say, no, I'll trip. I know myself. I'm too clumsy. I wouldn't be able to do that. Or, I would just blow it off like a stupid comment that it was. Or a lot of people would say, well, who's the real manager? Your husband, your boyfriend? Who are you fronting for? It's a cute gimmick, but who's the manager? And so it took a little time for me to show that it was actually me making the decisions. It was me pulling the strings. And they would test me every day. They would ask me questions, expecting me not to know the answers. And little by little, I think they realized, the men that I was working with, that I knew as much as they did, and that I had the respect of my fighters. And certainly longevity is proof. There's men that were in the business that are long gone, and I'm still managing fighters, 32 years later. And all of my old fighters, from James Toney to Bronco to Tommy Hearns, all of them, I still see them regularly. They all send me Mother's Day cards and birthday cards, and I've maintained a good relationship. So I think I've kind of proved to the world that gender, ethnicity, age, none of that's a factor. I mean, I'm 74 years old and I'm still out there managing kids that are younger than my grandchildren. So I don't think that anything should be a roadblock if you really want to do what you want to do.
Jackie, I got to ask you, I stumbled upon information that said that that's a good thing, that you do charity with your boxers. Do you still do that with your current boxers? I mean, obviously, when I was watching the videos, I think it was Tommy Hearns. I mean, you got him to go out to the communities and so forth. Is that still applying?
Absolutely. Tommy's right now out there helping to feed the frontline workers in this pandemic. We've had quite a lot of cases proportionately here in the Detroit area. We got hit pretty hard. And so he teamed up with a owner of a restaurant that I know very well. And they've been going out and feeding people on the front line, of course, with a mask, with gloves and all the proper, protection. But I've always urged every fighter I've worked with, go to children's hospitals, meet with the kids, let them try on your belt, let them see what it feels like. Go into the charity. We go into the cities and we do charity work with the rescue missions. We feed the homeless. I've done work with battered women's shelters, and I think it's important that they meet men who fight for a living but do not agree with hitting a woman. So I think there's a lot of causes that boxers can get involved in and make the world a better place.
Jackie, I have two questions, and they're not boxing related, and this is the only time I'm going to ask you non-boxing related questions.
That's okay.
Number one, Do you have chutzpah? Our Jewish friends will understand that. And number two, in 1964, you took Mick Jagger out shopping. How was that experience?
All right, well, we'll go to Mick Jagger first because the Rolling Stones were making their first United States American appearance. And I was a high school kid and writing for my school paper, I wanted to interview the Stones and realized they had a day off in between the Detroit show and the Chicago show, which is a nearby city. So I invited them over for dinner and I hung out with the guys. I took them shopping. I let them drive my mother's car because they wanted to drive on the other side because they always drove left side of the street. We drive right side. So it was a lot of fun. We had a good time. You know, he had never been in the home of an American teenager. And I took him to a party that night with a lot of my friends and him and Brian Jones. And we had a lot of fun. It was a great time. And I'll never forget that. I think that was a very important time in my life and just taught me how to talk to anybody, whether they're a celebrity or just the person next door. We're all basically the same.
And then with regards to, do you have chutzpah and how much chutzpah did you have back then? And that you still have now?
I think that's self-evident. I've always had chutzpah, meaning guts, meaning spirit, meaning, you know, that determination to walk anywhere, anytime. I'm basically what you call fearless. I'm not afraid of failure. I'm not afraid of whether people like me or not. That's irrelevant. I don't care what anybody says because I know who I am. I can't pay the bill with someone's opinion, so therefore it's worthless. And I just do what I want to do and hope it turns out for the best for myself and for everybody else. But I'm about as fearless a female as you're ever going to find. I'm not afraid of anything. Not even spiders, not even snakes, nothing.
Okay, and then moving on to 2020, I understand you've got a super lightweight, Juan Williams.
He's
Can you tell us about him?
Yeah, he's great. Okay, so I was at an event in Connecticut when Mike Juan was 14 years old, just a little kid, an amateur. And his trainer came up to me and he said, take a look at this kid. He's going to be a champion and we're going to be calling on you in about 4 years. So we kept in touch, you know, Facebook and online. And I get this call, well, in 6 months, he's going to be 18. He's ready to turn pro. Are you ready? I said, I'm down for it because I knew he was a great amateur. So we turned him pro. It's 4 years. And now he's I think he's 17-0-1 now. And if we hadn't had this pandemic, he would have been fighting in March and hopefully again in, you know, July. And we would be moving our way up to a world title fight sometime later this year or next. But everything just got pushed back a little bit. But he's a scrappy kid. He's a great kid. I mean, he's a lot of fun. He's intelligent. He's slick, fast in the ring. I love him. I love his spirit.
What sort of qualities do you look for when you're gonna manage a person, a boxer? What sort of qualities do you look for in that person?
I have like a 3-point kind of a screening process, and I look for 3 things. If they have all 3, it's a slam dunk. And number 1, they have to have an innate ability to fight. You have to be born with that certain movement, coordination, quick eye. I think it's something you're born with, a born singer, a born actor, a born whatever. It's in you. So a fighter has to have it in him or her right from the get-go. Secondly, they have to have discipline. They have to be a very solid, serious trainer. First in the gym, last one out, always ready to spar and train and not do drugs, not hang out on the streets. They have to be dedicated because all the talent in the world, if they're not dedicated and they don't train right, they're not going to make it. And I've seen it happen where very talented fighters threw it all away from street life. And same thing with some fighters that were terrifically dedicated, trained like crazy. They just didn't have that natural ability no matter how hard they trained. And then the third quality that I look for, and this is the most important one and the hardest to get, is heart. You've got to have that heart that you will get in there and you're willing to balls to the wall, go all the way, whatever it takes, dig deep and win that fight. If you give up easily or get discouraged easily, you don't have enough heart. So you can have the first two and not the third, no good. You can have all the heart in the world, no talent, no good. So I've had mixtures and they didn't make it, but when you've got all three, it's going to work.
Jackie, I was watching an interview recently with you when you said, when someone asked you the highlights of your career, and there were two, when Tommy in 1980 stopped Pepino Cuevas, and then obviously when James Toney beat Michael Nunn. And it's a question that maybe you haven't been asked, and I'd like to ask that. What was your low light of your career so far?
Okay, I would say interesting involves the same two fighters. The lowest point, I would say, with Tommy, it's a toss-up between the first Leonard fight and the Hagler fight, but probably that first Leonard fight in 81, because I was so sure that he was going to win. Just that feeling of pride for the fighter you work with, and undefeated and tough. And had it been a 12-round fight, we know he would have won, but it wasn't. It was 15 rounds back then. But that disappointment was crushing on several levels. I was stupid enough to make a large wager, very large wager, which I have not done since. I learned my lesson. I was so sure. Didn't happen. That was very painful in a lot of ways. And secondly, the second biggest low was when James did not renew his contract after the second 3 years. Following the Roy Jones fight, we had a falling out. We patched it up and went on for a couple more fights. But when the contract ran out, he chose to go with someone else. And that was very painful. I was crushed by that. So those were the two lows, and they involve the same two fighters.
Well, fighters are notoriously known to make such moves, unpredictable moves. How often do you see that though? Like with fighters sort of changing their minds, or just not, or changing their stance on certain things. How often do you see that?
When fighters change trainers, managers, things like that?
Yes.
Unfortunately, that was my first and hardest lesson. He was like a son to me. He hung out with my boys. He went on family trips with us. I planned his wedding. He was at my son's wedding. He was family. So I believed anything could be fixed and we'd keep going together. So when he chose to go in another direction, I was crushed. And then I learned after that happens. Fighters listen to other people. Someone comes along and says, "Oh, I can do better than her. Let me give you some money. I'll slip you, 50 grand in an envelope right now. Come with me. She's not doing the right thing for you." So I realized that that's part of the game, and nothing's ever hurt me that much since. I've had fighters along the way that have come up to me and said, "Well, I think I could do better with someone else, or maybe I should have had that fight. You didn't get it for me, so I don't want to work with you anymore." So now I just simply give them their release and say good luck. And none of them have ever gone on to do anything. So it never was anything that I was, disappointed about. But they have to trust you, because there's two kinds of fighters I found. One who thinks he's ready to kill anybody, anytime. He's ready to fight for a title. If you don't get him that fight, you're a bad manager. You don't believe in him. But the truth is, he's not ready. And if you put him in too soon, he's going to lose, and he's going to blame you anyways. And then there's the one that's a really good fighter, but they don't have a lot of confidence. So every fight you get him, it's like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't think I could beat him. He's too tall. He's too strong, this, that." And you're always dealing with trying to build their confidence, tell them that they're ready. And it's, if it doesn't work and they think they can do better elsewhere, I've never been in litigation or arbitration, never sued a fighter or been sued. I just say good luck. It happens. That's boxing.
I want to know, is there ever a situation as a manager where you're like, maybe I shouldn't have taken that fight, or I shouldn't have pursued this sort of path? Have you ever experienced something like that? And if so, could you just let us know?
Well, I think we make mistakes along the way. Sometimes we'll think a guy's ready and he barely squeaks through that fight, and you think, oh, I should have probably waited. I got lucky this time. And then there's sometimes where you match a fighter knowing a perfect fight for him, and he gets a draw, or the judges see it the other way, and you know your fighter won. It just didn't go your way. That's part of the game. You know, you make mistakes like any other industry or sport. I own my mistakes. I never try to blame it on someone else, the matchmaker or the trainer. If I made a mistake in judgment or I put you in the wrong fight at the wrong time, it's on me. I own that. You have to own your mistakes. But fortunately, in the 32 years I've been managing, I haven't made that many. So I don't have a whole lot of regrets, but I take it so seriously. I mean, every step that a fighter takes is in my hands. Me and his trainer together, we have to decide, is he ready for this? How's his body feel? Did he get cut? Is his arm sore? Did he hyperextend an elbow? I mean, is he in good shape? Because most fighters aren't 100% every fight. It's just not possible. So you have a lot of decisions to make. And I try to make the best one, but yeah, we make mistakes.
Jackie, you've been around the fight game for a very long time, and you've seen a lot of good things, you've seen a lot of bad things, and you've seen a lot of sad things, but you've also seen a lot of funny things. What's the funniest moment of your boxing career that you can recall that you still think about now and you still start laughing?
Okay, there's a couple. I mean, I think we've all seen the tapes and the showings of the guys who've knocked out the referee accidentally. You know, he gets in the middle and he gets knocked out. But I think one of the funniest is when a guy had to go to the bathroom really bad, and it was in the middle of a fight, and things happen, and sometimes you smell it before you see it, and that yeah, that I've only seen that once, but you don't forget that. Yeah, that's kind of memorable. And of course, everybody laughs when the trunks come down too low, and you know, there's things that happen that are humorous, but it's not really a funny sport. You know, there aren't a lot of ha ha moments. There's some ironic moments, things that are really funny in a strange way, but like funny things that will stick rolls of coins between a guy's butt to make him weigh a little more if there's a discrepancy in that. And you know, some of the little tricks that are played are kind of funny, but the laugh out loud moments, you know, are mostly like if a guy flips over another guy, looks like he's wrestling and lands on his back or something kind of stupid. But I think a guy that lost control in the middle of the fight tickled me the most.
Jackie, with boxing is notorious for fighters staying in the sport for too long. Have you ever had to sit down with a fighter and tell them it's time to call it a day?
Absolutely. And it's a sad, difficult conversation because you don't want to tell anybody that they have to stop doing what they love doing. To be honest, I have that discussion with Tommy Hearns at least twice a week because we see each other all the time. Not as much now, obviously, because we're all in semi-lockdown. But Tommy, who will be 62 this year, always talks about, I want to get in there again. I want to get Marvin again. I want to fight again. And I always tell him, you know, Tommy, I don't think that's a great idea. He says, why? I'm in great shape. I could do it. Not a good idea. And so you have to sometimes explain to somebody, Father Time is not on your side. Your reflexes slow down. Your legs aren't there anymore. You can't get out of the way as much. Your body is trying to do what the mind is telling it to do, but it just isn't able to quickly do the things it did at 20. Even 40, you're slower. By 50, you know, you see guys like Mike Tyson wanting to fight Holyfield again. And, you know, fighters, they love it. They love the feeling of that walk to the ring and all the fans cheering and getting in there and kind of moving around and jumping around. And it's their office. That ring is where they go to work. And nobody wants to be put out of their job and sent off to pasture. So everybody wants to continue to fight. But there's times when you have to sit someone down and explain you're going to get hurt. And, you know, there's a lot of danger. Young guys can get killed in the ring. It's infrequent and kind of rare that it happens, but it does happen. And fighters do get Parkinson's, and they do get pugilistic and dementia, and they do get Alzheimer's and things as a result, a result of that constant punching to the brain. And a lot of the damage is done in the gym, not in the actual fight. So many times I've had to sit down with one fighter or another and say, let's assess the situation. Let's take a look at where you are now compared to where you were 10 years ago, 15 years ago. A young kid, half your age, can knock your head off. And is it worth it? But usually they'll say, yes, it is. They want to get back in there.
Jackie, have you had young aspiring females that want to do the same thing that you do come up to you? And I'm sure there'll be many watching this as well. So what sort of advice would you give them to jump into sort of a male dominated industry and sort of take the bull by the horns and dominate themselves?
Well, I have had over the years, many women turn to me for advice and encouragement, motivation. And I always spend the time to talk to them, meet with them, try to give them some tips and help them to, kind of navigate a road that wasn't there, when I started out, make it easy for them. But I always tell them, number one, develop a really thick skin. Don't listen to what anyone says. Don't let the fighters get you down with their comments. Don't worry about people's innuendos and things. Just do your job. Don't worry about all that. Secondly, remain you. You don't have to dress down, dummy down, act anything different than what you normally are. If they don't accept you, I didn't look the part, I guess, as a typical person in boxing, because being blonde and wearing makeup and jewelry, and I was always more, dressed up rather than dressed down. I didn't go to the gym in sweats and sneakers and try to look like one of the guys. I was always like fashionable. And a lot of people thought that was, not the right way to go because I didn't look like I fit in. But I always tell people, be you. You'll fit in. Just be yourself. They'll either accept you or they won't accept you, but don't change yourself to fit someone else's image or idea of who you should be. And I also tell women to stay strong. Don't give in and agree to something that you don't want to just because you feel like you're going to lose the battle, so you might as well just give in. Stand up for what you believe in. You have as much right to say what you believe as anybody else does. And it shouldn't be gender, ethnicity, age. There's so many isms: racism, ageism, sexism. We should not have to buckle to any of that. Do what you want. I don't care if you're black, white, female, male, whether you're young or old. I'm old. I'm a senior citizen. I'm in my 70s, and I'm a woman, and I'm white. And those are just facts. That's who I am. Take it or leave it, but it's not going to stop me from doing anything. If you tell me I'm too old, that's your opinion, not mine. If you tell me I'm too white, I'm too this, that's your opinion, not mine. So I try to teach women to just own who they are and believe in themselves. But that goes for men too. It goes for everybody in life.
Jackie, in any era, any year, you could have one fighter you could manage. Who would it be and why?
That's a great question, and no one's ever asked that. Believe it or not, no one's ever asked me if I could have any one fighter. Obviously, I'm just grateful to have had the fighters I've had. That's number one. I've been blessed by some wonderful, talented fighters. But if going back to any era, I think I would have had a lot of fun with Jake LaMotta. Not because he was the greatest, but because he was such a character. And I came to get close to him later in life, over the last 30 years of his life. And he was like an uncle, and I just loved being with him. And he told great stories. And I think I would have had fun managing him back in the day. But as far as pure talent, I think I would have had a great time managing Muhammad Ali. I think that would have been a lot of fun because I love Angelo Dundee. I always did. And working with him would have been great. I have worked with him, but back in the day, it would have been fun. I think those two are the ones that maybe Rocky Marciano. I think he would have been a lot of fun to manage. Can't go back, but if I could, I think those would be really interesting guys to work with.
In terms of fighters that you've managed in the past, have you ever looked at any one of your fighters and thought, gee, that guy didn't fulfill his talent. He could have done so much more or anything like that?
Well, it's interesting. I look at Kenny Gould, who was a bronze medalist in the Olympics when I got him. And I thought, wow, Kenny can be a world champion. He had over 300 amateur fights. I was pretty confident that he had what it took to go all the way. But number one, he had more of an amateur style, than he did a pro style. And I think he was plagued by injuries. He had rotator cuff injuries and tears. And if it wasn't for injuries and if he had been able to sit down more on his punches and really get more leverage into them, his boxing ability was just off the charts. So I really think he could have and should have been a world champion. It just didn't pan out for him. But Kenny Gould for sure.
I want you to go to not 2020 this year. What's the super fight that you want to see? What's sort of the talk of the town? What do you want to see?
Well, a lot of people think Floyd's going to come back and fight again. Oscar. They talk about all these fights. Any fight with Terrence Crawford's a great fight to me. I love Errol Spence. I love Crawford. I love watching, Canelo Alvarez. There's so many good fighters today. I think the super fights now are in the heavyweight division, with Anthony Joshua and Ortiz and Wilder and all the heavyweights. I think that's the interest now, is everybody wants to see these big guys mix it up. And I've always loved heavyweights. My dream was always to have the heavyweight champion of the world. It didn't happen, or hasn't happened yet. But I think people love the heavyweights, don't you? I mean, isn't that always the division that causes the most excitement?
I agree.
Jackie, I want to talk now about your career kind of in the Hollywood spectrum. Meg Ryan portrayed your life story, apparently, which I know isn't accurate. I wanted to know what it was like. I wanted to know what that was like. And I also wanted to know what was it like working with Sylvester Stallone and my favorite fighter of all time, Sugar Ray Leonard, in the Contender. So what were those moments like for you?
Let's start with the good first. That would be the Contender. I thoroughly loved every day on set because I had the same dressing room with Ray and Sly. So for 2 months, we were together all day, every day. And I'd known both of them before. So especially Ray, I've known Ray since '79. And they're such good guys, both of them. Ray is such a gentleman and a lovely, lovely human being. Just one of the nicest. And of course, Sly Stallone, I've admired and been a fan of way before I even met him. So being able to be with him every day and get to know him as well as I did, he's a great storyteller. So he would sit there in the dressing room in between when we'd have hours of, when the guys were doing their thing and we didn't have to be on the set. And he would tell the most glorious stories about the movies he made and the stars that he worked with. And he was just an icon and a legend to be around. Both of them are legends. So for me to be with them every day and to, listen to their stories and to have them interested in what I had to say was a great compliment. And I think it was probably one of the best 2 months I experienced. Plus the guys, the contenders themselves, there's 16 of them. Well, 2 of them have passed, but I've stayed in touch with several of them. And it was a great experience. The first season was wonderful on NBC. The show never was quite the same after that, but that first season was magical. I thoroughly loved every second of it. Now to the movie, not as much. I would not have particularly picked Meg Ryan to play me, but that's who ended up getting the part. I did not care for the script. It was not accurate. I wouldn't say that her performance captured who I am. She's so cutesy, and I'm not cute. I don't think anyone's ever said I was cute. I just don't fit that word. I'm like you said, I got a chutzpah, I'm ballsy. I'm not a cute person. And so I think that her portrayal was a little off the mark. I mean, it was a cute movie. I liked it. If I didn't know me, I would think it was entertaining, but it was not the real story. Kind of disappointing.
Looking at the current crop of fighters, young fighters, that is, fighters who haven't won the title yet, which fighters would you say we should fighters to look out for in the next 5 years or so, next 2 to 5 years? Who would you say?
Well, you know what? I'm going to stick with my Quan. I'm going to say my Juan Williams, and I want to leave it at that because he's my guy, and I want people to start focusing on him. You know, he's only 21. He's a kid. He's got a lot of years ahead of him. I think he'll go from 140 to 147. I think he's capable of winning titles in both. I don't know that he'll go to 54. He's not that tall, but I think he's a bright light, and I'm going to stick with him and stick to my story. That's the guy I'm going to go with.
You're obviously still managing today, and it's been a very successful long career. And we spoke about earlier about having the talk with the boxers. Have you ever had any thoughts to be like, oh, maybe I should retire, or are you going to go as long as you possibly can?
Well, I never gave that a thought. You know, I do motivational speaking around the country, and I love that. I also do a podcast, not about boxing, you know, just kind of like The View with a group of girls. And that's been real successful here, and I love doing that. I do my charity work, which is something that I'll never stop doing. I'm working on the 3rd book. I don't think I'll retire until I can no longer do it. You know, if I, God forbid, you know, my thinking's not there anymore, of course I won't be able to do it. Or physically, I'm unable to climb into the ring. I don't think I'd want to just sit on the sidelines. If I can't be active and work with these guys, I might just say it's time. But for now, I can't see an end coming. I hope not.
Jackie, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on our show. For the viewers,
anytime. I'm so happy that you thought to invite me. I'm very honored, and it was wonderful to meet your friends over there.
I wanted to ask you, do you have your last parting shot for the viewers who are going to be watching this here in South Africa and generally maybe even around the world?
Only to believe in yourself and do whatever your heart tells you to do. There are no limitations, only the ones that you put on yourself. And that's the most important lesson I can tell anyone. I've had a blessed journey. I've met presidents and every celebrity in the field of music, entertainment, sports. It's a big life out there. Just go out there and try to make every day the best day of your life. And today, talking to you guys has made today wonderful for me. So I thank you, and I look forward to talking to you again.
That is Jackie Kallen, the First Lady of Boxing, and it's been an absolute pleasure interviewing you. Thanks for watching the Boxing Lockdown, powered by SA Boxing Talk. We'll catch you again soon.
I hope so. Bye, guys.